So what's going on there, everybody? Got a fun one today. Well, probably today, tomorrow, maybe the next day. Depends on how fast I want to go. What I've got behind me here is my 2004 Chevy Blazer, and it's got the typical rusted out backing plates on the rear axle. Um, really, the only thing the backing plates do is keep the shoes in place for the parking brake. A while ago, I disassembled everything and chipped away what was falling off of the backing plate already, and it's starting to make some pretty terrible noise now. I'll get it up in the air here in a second, spin a tire, you can hear it, and it's a little concerning. Not gonna lie, never like my brakes to make noises they're not supposed to. So I'm gonna finally take care of it. I've got new backing plates, brand new AC Delco brand. Um, I've got some brand new ceramic pads. I've got some rotors which are almost brand new. I got them from the salvage yard. Not gonna lie, doing this budget style, but they look brand new. Aside from that, I got brand new hardware to go in for the parking brake assemblies and the hardware for the calipers and pads and all that. Brand new slider pins and all that I can grease up and put in there. I even have from the salvage yard a pair of almost new calipers along with the brackets, because on these trucks the slider pins are known to rust up and seize, and when you go to remove them you will snap the bolt off in the bracket. So I hope I'm not gonna need them, but I do have new brackets for the rear calipers if needed. I've already went through that once. I've replaced the brackets once already because a bolt on each side snapped off in the bracket. So I'm prepared for that this time. Hopefully I don't have to go through that, but I do have that. So in order to do this, I've seen people take these brand new backing plates and cut them to slide them over the axle without having to pull the axle shaft out of the rear axle. That's fine. If you feel like doing that, go for it. But they're brand new backing plates, and I don't feel the need to cut them in half just to put them on there. I'll just pull the diff cover off and pull the C clips out and slide the axle shafts out. It's not that difficult of a job, but a lot of people tend to shy away from it just because it takes longer. Now, this truck has 216,000 miles on it, I think, right now, and I'm pretty sure the rear diff fluid's original. I don't think it's ever been changed. I've had the truck for maybe 5 years now, a little over. I've never changed it. I've checked it, it's full, but never changed it. Couldn't tell you if it's been changed in the past. I'm not the original owner from 2004, so I figure now's a better time, no better time than now to change the fluid too. So I've got a brand new diff cover to throw on it, even threw a coat of nice red paint on it, just for reasons. And the original one, it's holding fluid, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's kind of rusty, crusty looking, and I figured I'm going to pull it off there. Why not throw something pretty on it? And there's nothing built about this rear end. It's all stock. It's just a 7.5 inch 10 bolt with a G80 locker in it, gov lock, whatever you want to call them. So it's bone stock. I am running 31 1050 tires on it, but it honestly needs to be re-geared for those tires, but I don't worry too much about it. But I'm going to get the truck up in the air and give the wheels a spin and show you exactly this noise we're hearing now, because it's not great. So obviously the first thing you need to do before you get it off the ground, pull the lug nuts loose. Otherwise it's going to be difficult to keep the tires still when you go to torque on them and break the lug nuts loose. So got the truck up on jack stands right now, only just barely, just enough for the tires to be off the ground so I can remove them. Ideally you want this obviously as high as possible, which is going to make getting underneath it obviously much easier. I'm doing this driveway style, using nothing more than a little floor jack and some little jack stands. So, of course, once you get it up in the air, give it some good shakes and make sure it ain't going nowhere, because once you pull them those tires off, you don't want those jack stands giving way. I'm going to take those those tires and actually lay them on the ground underneath the truck just as a peace of mind. Good practice. Now, in my case, I have my spare mounted up on the back. Which is just something I did to this four-door. They don't usually come that way. The spare is usually mounted up underneath here on that little hanger. So if you have a four-door, or actually this whole video pretty much applies to any GM, 7.5 or 8.5, 10-bolt rear end. It's all the same set of procedures. if the spare's in your way, go ahead and drop it and get it out of the way. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. See, now all I'm dealing with is the sway bar, which is not going to be in the way, it's not going to stop me, and the brake line running across there. So, those are the only two things in my way. There's where the backing plate's supposed to be. None of this should be exposed. The rotor from the backside. It's pretty rusty up in there. You can actually, the fact that I can touch the parking brake shoe is not good. So, it's not supposed to be like that. There's supposed to be a lot more material, but that's crazy. I didn't even notice that before, but you can see the axle spinning in there because there's no cover. So, of course, the sound isn't that horrible now that there's no weight on it. Or, I mean, you can kind of hear it. It's not terrible now that it's not riding. When you get some speed, it's pretty bad. But as you can see, the rotors, they're shot. So they need to be replaced too. So, but yeah, there's supposed to be a lot more material there. And the other side is, excuse me, don't get motion sickness with the camera here. Rolling around on the ground. The other side is just as bad. So you can see the shoe in there. It's this side shot as well. So don't worry about that. That noise is literally the tire loose. So yeah, the fact that I can see the parking brake shoe. There's a little bit of material left on this one. Not much though. There's just the edge of it there that you can see. That's supposed to come all the way out here, and actually I think it lips over that. Actually, I think it covers the whole brake rotor. This whole what you see from the inside when it's complete and not rusted and chipped away. So that's what we're dealing with. So everything else under here doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's originally a Tennessee truck, so you know, all things considered, frame wise and everything else, it's not terrible. I mean, it's got some body rust, but not too worried about that. But we got to get this diff cover off. Well, first I'm going to get the wheels and tires off. But this is the diff cover I was talking about. Like I said, there's nothing terribly wrong with it. It's solid. It's not leaking anywhere. But I got a brand new one that's all painted and prettied up for it. So, and we might even pull the sway bar off. No, I'm not going to go that far. Never mind, scratch that. But I will give this stuff a good, you know, rough it up, and might even hit it with some black paint or undercoating just to protect it a little bit better and make it last a little bit longer. So, let's get to it. Pro tip, if you're rolling underneath a truck on your back over and over again, get this freaking trailer ball out of your way, because you will hit this thing on your shin and your back and everywhere else 20 times before you finish what you're doing. Alright, so we got the wheels out of the way. A little bit better view of what we're working with here. Old rusty rotors that are, there's some meat left on them, but they're due. The pads, I want to say I put these pads on a while ago. Obviously, I've had the calipers, you know, I painted them, just, you know, for reasons. And I think there's a brand new AC Delco, well, brand new at the time, AC Delco branded calipers, or pads. And they work great, but they're just regular semi-metallic pads, and my God, do they make a lot of brake dust. So around the same time, I put the same thing on the front, and I had a caliper lockup, and the brakes they didn't perform great. And I think once the fronts, I put new calipers on the front, and I put ceramic pads on it at the time on the front. So the fronts have been doing great, but I think for some period of time I was having some front brake issues, and the rears were doing the majority of the braking when I was having the one lock up front, and it wore these pads down pretty quick. So they're due. I'm sure the 8-up rotors aren't helping the lifespan of these pads. So like I said, I got brand new ceramic pads put in here, got some rotors to throw on it, calipers and brackets if needed. So nearly the next step from here, I'm going to go ahead and pull these calipers off and get these drums out of the way and take off what's left of the parking brake shoes and the hardware and all that from both sides, and get ready to pop the diff cover off and slide these axle shafts out so I can get the new covers on. Alright, so we've got the brake calipers off now. Got these two little bolts, which actually hold the caliper to the bracket. These two bigger bolts hold the bracket to the axle. those were unnervingly, not loose, but they weren't very tight. So, yeah, that's a little disconcerting, but no one to blame but myself. I put it together last time. So, the pads, they're pretty well worn on this passenger side, but they are worn even, so that's a good sign. I don't think they've quite gotten down to the, yeah, they haven't quite gotten down to the wear indicators yet. There is, you know, if you want to be frugal, there's a little life left on them, but those are original, the AC Delco ones that I put on it. So they've been on here for, God, a while, so they have served their purpose. You can tell they've grooved into the rotor pretty good, though. That rotor is shot, definitely, because it's got a nice little groove. I mean, hell, you could see it, much less feel it. That was the inside. This is the outside one. It's definitely grooved too. So definitely time for some new pads, and definitely time to get these rotors out of here. I'll probably have to smack that with a hammer to get it off of there. You hear that though? That's nothing but parking brake shoe and backing plate sliding against it, because there's nothing else on it right now. But let's take a look at the driver's side. That's where the real interesting story is. So the noise that I've been hearing was definitely coming from this side. That pad, the inner one, she's down to bare metal, so that's been grinding. So that would explain, and actually the first clue was this retention spring was wedged in there and was starting to wear itself pretty thin right there. As you can see, it's supposed to be longer like this, so it hooks into the pad, and it had already worn away a good little bit. So that's yeah, these are overdue to be changed. I mean, it's down past the pad material. It was into bare metal. This was metal on metal with the rotor on the inside. So that definitely explains the grinding noise that I've been hearing with the braking. The outer one, not as bad. It is shot. So, I mean, this one doesn't have the wear indicator on it. It's the other side. Imagine that. Oh yeah, it does. No, that's just a tab to locate it. I'm sorry. So, if there was a wear indicator on there, it's broken off and gone. Honestly, it looks like it might have had there. Like the metal fatigue is broken off and gone. But yeah, this one is definitely due. This one is beyond due. So there's nothing left of this pad. It was, like I said, it was metal on metal. So that explains the noise. So, but like I said, this rotor's going too. It's making that nice noise as what's left of the parking brake shoe is sliding around in there. And I was pleasantly surprised at these pins that normally rust and seize up in there. Apparently I applied a liberal amount of grease last time, because they still move. So I can reuse these brackets, that's good, but I do have new slider pins, like I said, that I'm going to be putting in here, as well as the new boots to contain the grease and keep moisture out, to keep those from rusting up again. So that's great. I don't have to bother about swapping over new brackets. I can reuse my old brackets, nothing wrong with those, which is good because they're nice and painted black. But anywho, I'm going to tap these rotors a couple of times with a hammer and get them off of there. Start taking what's left of the parking brake shoes off and all the rusted up hardware that's left. Alright, so we got our rotors off. This side, no unusual wear other than this large hump in the center and some dings from where I smacked it with a hammer to get it off there, because, you know, I wasn't concerned about keeping it because I got a replacement. Here's another story. There should be metal all the way around here. So, parking shoe still on there. This one's actually got a little meat left on it. Do have a replacement for that. Got a replacement for all the auto adjustment hardware down there. I even have new axle shaft seals, because these axles are coming out to get the backing plate on. These are probably original, so they're coming out, getting replaced with brand new ones. Might as well. I'm going to be in there. I'm going to have access to them. Seals are dirt cheap. You might as well just go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you can put all this back together, have an axle shaft start leaking, and you got to do it all again, tear it all apart, just to replace the seal you could have done while you had the axle out the first time. So, like you see, there's what's left of the backing plate right there, rusty and very minimal. This side is actually the better side. So, the driver's side Here's what's left of the shoe on it. There is no shoe material. It is bare. I don't know if it's just been dragging and it has worn away, or if they're only bonded to this. Maybe it came unglued, unbonded, whatever. As you can see, the backing plate's in the same condition. The rotor is even worse, where it's been grinding on the metal, what was left of the pad. So that joker was definitely needing to be replaced. So yeah, we got this far. I think from here, I'm just going to pop the diff cover off and get these axles out of the way, just to make it easier to get to the backing plate bolts. And once I get the diff cover out of the way, I'll pull the C-clips out. Well, remove the locking bolt out of the cross shaft, pin, whatever you want to call it. Slide that out. I can push the axles in that little bit, because you do have a little bit of wiggle room. And you push them in a little bit. Once you get that pin out, you pull the C-clip out, and then the axle shaft will slide out. So let's get to that diff cover. Alright, here's another pro tip. Before you ever pull a diff cover off, well, particularly these 7.5s, and I think the 8.5s are the same way, these GM 10 bolts, there's no drain plug, but there is a fill plug. Make sure you can get that fill plug loose and open before you pull this cover off and drain the fluid. Because if you can't add fluid to it, and you pull this cover off and drain the fluid, you're screwed. So, on the passenger side of the diff, there is a little guy right there. That's all it is. Take a normal 3/8 drive ratchet. Try to do this blindly. Slip it in there. And of course you can't see it, but you don't have to pull it out right now. Just make sure that she turns. Now I already cracked it loose, so yeah, it turns. But I'm going to go ahead and snug it back up so nothing seeps out while I'm in here. But make sure you can crack that loose first, so you can add fluid to this differential once you're done. Otherwise, you get a whole new set of problems. Alright, so we've gotten into its guts, the rear end here. Definitely never been serviced before. Original paper gasket. And yeah, there's a fair bit of material on the magnet. It's not too terribly bad, though. I have honestly seen worse. So, pretty pleased with that. The fluid was a little dark. You know, definitely darker than you want your average 80-90 GL5 to be. And things don't look too bad, all things considered, the mileage. So, I'm going to spin it over, see if I can get that pin out, slide the axle shafts out, let this joker drip dry for a little while, and probably spray it down with some brake cleaner to get as much of this old junk out of here as I can. So, tell you what though, 80-90 with about 216,000 miles on it, smells wonderful. Before we can pull these axle shafts out of either side, we've got to push them inwards to remove the C-clip, which is in the center. In order to do that, that little round pin has got to come out. In order to get that out, that little bolt head right there has got to come out. All you need to do is take in 8mm, put it on there. If you can't see this right away, put the truck in neutral and basically just turn the drive shaft over until this comes around. There's another spot on the other side that just looks blank. There's no bolt. So you have to spin it around so you can see this. And then once you get it, you might have to turn a little bit more. There it goes. The transmission just popped into neutral or park. So now this gear will stay still, and it helps to put a little double wrench on here. And it shouldn't be super tight. Crack it loose. So, and I'm not loosening it. I've got a cheap wrench, so I've got to go to another 8mm before I completely round this off and screw myself. So I will be right back. So as it turns out, I was using the wrong size. I'm stuck in the metric gauge. It ended up being a 5/16 that got that bolt out. Well, technically not out. It's still actually in here. I was able to slide it out far enough to get that pin out because it actually hits the bearing cap. So, trying to remove this cross pin, if you can't get that bolt all the way out, is maybe just because it's the G80 rear end. If you don't have an automatic disc lock, it'll probably come all the way out. But in my case, the bolt hit, but there's enough room to go ahead and slide that pin out. We can see our C-clips down in there now. Well, not from this angle. I'll have to turn this over again. So we can put it in neutral, turn this so we can get to our C-clips, push our axles in, get the C-clips out, and then get the axle shafts. Alright, so now that we've got our cross pin out of the way, if we push the axle in from the outside a little bit, that is our C-clip right there, that little loose floppy thing in there. So with all luck, I can take this little magnet on a stick and get in here and work it until it comes out. There's nothing else that holds it in there but the axle being pulled out slightly. I really wish this would focus so you can see what the heck I was doing. There we go. And there's our C-clip. Gee, wonder why they call it a C-clip. I suppose it could be a U, but that's all that hold the axle shaft in there. So now we'll go outside and we're going to slide the axle shaft right out of the tube. So yeah, like I said, with that C-clip removed, now there's literally nothing holding this axle shaft in. You can just grab it and she'll pull right out. This is a two-person job if you don't, or a two-hand job if you don't want to make a complete mess. So I'm about to put the camera down, put a rag in my other hand, and catch the fluid as it drips out when I pull it out. Otherwise, I'll have a mess all over the ground. I don't really feel like cleaning that up later. So, all right, so we got both our axle shafts out. Like I said, these little C-clips, what we were looking at in there is where they slide into this little notch at the very end of the axle, and they catch on the inside of the diff. And that's all that holds the axle shafts in. So, yep. But now we've got access to all of our parking brake shoe hardware and this backing plate, which was the main thing I wanted to get to by removing these axle shafts. So to get that out, we'll pull these shoes off, not that there's much holding them on there, and these 4 bolts hold the backing plate on. Get that out of the way, we can start cleaning things up and actually get ready for assembly of new parts. So tear down is, aside from these parking brake shoes and backing plates and seals, because I'm replacing those too, is done. After that, it's just reassembly of clean parts, throw oil back in it, and should be good to go. Once the parking brake shoes out of the way, those 4 bolts are removed from around here. You can now remove what's left of the backing plate, which isn't much. This is supposed to be much larger. So that's what's left of the backing plate. It's gone. Aside from that, this bracket here, which is probably, yeah, that's actually what your caliper bolts to, and where your parking brake cable comes in and attaches. I'm gonna clean all this up, probably paint it just to keep it from rusting anymore, and get that auto tensioner for the parking brake gutted, because I got new internals for that, and this side will be ready for reassembly with new parts afterwards. Well, off camera, and I did it off camera because who wants to watch people paint things, I cleaned up the axle stub end and the bracket there, and just gave them a quick light coat of some black Rust-Oleum paint. Did it to both sides just to keep the rust down a little bit. And underneath, I went ahead and gave the rear end a good cleaning. Everything looks beautiful in here. So she's about ready to start throwing parts on it. I'm gonna go ahead and dig the new backing plates out and get those and the brackets bolted back on, and get ready to go ahead and yank these seals out on the outside so I can throw some new ones in there. Alright, so here's where we're standing so far. New backing plates on, new brake shoes on, the new auto tensioning or self-adjuster hardware on, as well as a hold down bracket for the shoe. The kit came with a new bolt for this. It didn't fit. It was too small. So threw the old one on. Nothing wrong with that at all. And now, as you can see, I think I showed you, that's what was left of the old backing plates. Not much. That was the screws that were a little too small. Now, the brake shoe kit came with these springs for the parking brakes. No idea what they do. Could not find a diagram anywhere online that showed them installed. So they got left out. So this is how it was when I took it apart. That's how it's going back together. And so far everything's going together great. So I'm actually waiting on my shipment from Rock Auto. The backing plates and everything came in today. And I have a second shipment coming in with the new seals, the axle shaft seals, and the diff cover gasket. And actually the slider pins for the calipers are with those two. So as soon as those come in tomorrow, hopefully it's when it's supposed to be in, I can get all this stuff slapped together. The only thing left is to pop these axle shaft seals out, pop the new ones back in, slide the axle shafts back in, lock the C-clips in, lock down that cross shaft in there in the diff, put the new diff cover on, fill it full of fluid, and she'll be good to go. And like I said, with the brand new rotors and ceramic brake pads going on it too, shouldn't have any more rear brake problems for a while. So it's definitely an involved process. So I will update tomorrow. Fixing to clean this mess up. But yeah, we'll update tomorrow. See if we can't get everything thrown back together and buttoned up, and she'll be good to go. Alright, it's another beautiful day here in sunny Florida. Day 2 of this. Got our little Rock Auto delivery this morning. So I got my diff cover gasket, the wheel seal, or the axle seals. I ordered 2 different types of seals because I wasn't sure which seal was on this. Apparently there's 2 different types of axles. I think it has something to do with where they were produced. And I could not find anywhere on the axle the code. It's either a letter C or a letter K in a series of numbers and letters that tells you where the axle was made. I couldn't find it, so I ordered both seals, and I'm glad I did because it actually ended up being the one that I guessed wrong. So they were pretty cheap. I think one was like $5 a piece, one was like $2 a piece. So I just ordered both, and I got my slider pins here. So wow, those are actually, oh, never mind. I thought they were glued shut. So got a brand new slider pins, 2 kits, 1 for each caliper. And the seals, those look like the ones that are actually on it. These were the other one. So, like I said, depending on which one you have, one is smooth on the outside edge. This is not the one that's in mine. But that is national part number 8660S. Not in my case, but there are some other Blazers that will use them in an S10s, or probably just general 7.5 axles. And the other one is national number 710166. This is the one that is on mine. As you can see, it has that lip flange on the outer edge that presses in there and holds it. So that's the one. These are the ones that I'm ending up needing in my case. I'll probably just pay it forward, give these away on the Blazer forum I'm on or something. Either that or there's a buddy down the road for me that does work on the side. Ooh, look at that magnet too. What do we get here? We got Collector Series 200, Kathy's Chevy built with Rock Auto parts. That is a beautiful Camaro. Black. Nice. Anywho, I had to go in the fridge with the rest of them. So, without further ado, let's get the old seals off of there. Get these new ones tapped in there, and I can get to reassembling everything else. So, of course, the first thing you want to do is make sure you got the right part. You can just hold it up to it. She looks to be the correct one. What I mean about the flange on the outer edge here matches this one here. And the axle shaft inner diameter of that seal lip. Alright, as you can see with my assortment of tools here at my disposal, I had to get pretty medieval on this thing to get it off. The seal puller ended up just ripping through the edges, so it was in there too good for that. What I ended up using was a ball joint remover. I managed to get one fork in there behind it and used the handle off a high lift jack as a breaker bar on this thing, and once I got it to push up just a little bit on the lip, I was able to take the hammer and a flat head, work my way around the top, and it literally popped out of my lap. In fact, I got a big grease stain in my lap from the axle grease that came out with it. So that one's out. It's time to grab the new one and tap her on in. New seals in. They do make dedicated seal installers, which it basically just looks like a big washer that you can place on here, and it contacts just this outer lip, and you can tap on that with a hammer to seat it in there. Or on the side, if you don't want to get that, you can use a giant socket. This one's a little small, but it does at least contact the metal all the way around instead of putting any pressure on the rubber lip seal. And that's what you want. You don't want to put any marks in this rubber. So we'll set this on there, give it taps all the way, and it is snugged up nicely on that axle tube. So I'll I'm going to go tackle the other side, and then we'll get ready to slide the axle shafts back in. Alright, so we got both our seals in, getting ready to slide the axle shafts in here, but you never want to slide the axle shaft in this seal, new seal, dry. So all you got to do, take your finger, put it in there, get a little gear oil on it, and just wet this seal a little bit with some gear oil. That'll keep it from tearing the seal as you insert the axle, or running dry the first time you get the vehicle moving once you get everything back together. Alright, and just like we did with the seal, doesn't hurt to get a little bit of axle lube and just slide that around this sealing surface on the very outside edge of your axle shaft. And again, that's just to keep it from riding dry on the seal once you get everything back together. So, wipe this off my hand. Actually, I've already put the one side in, so we'll slide this side in now. Try to do this one-handed. Obviously line it up. Make sure the lip doesn't get folded over or pinched in any way. Slowly slide it in there, straight. Okay. Now, once you get so far in here, you'll notice you'll come to a point where it'll just stop. Still sticking out a little bit, that's because it's hitting your inner bearing. So basically you're going to kind of want to torque it a little bit this way. That's going to bend the inside of that axle shaft up, not bend, but lift it so that it'll get past that bearing. So just give it a little twist, and now it's in that bearing. Slide it on in. If it doesn't go in right away, it feels solid, you've got to engage those splines in the center. And the easiest way to do that, instead of turning the axle, you could possibly dislodge the spiders in there. Then you got to reassemble that. Just go in and out just a little bit at a time. Eventually, it'll line up and she'll go in there. Actually, now there it goes. And it's in all the way, and you can check and make sure it's seated all the way in there. So now if we crawl underneath, we should be able to line up those C-clips, pop them in there, tug the axles back out, then the axle shafts are back in there. Alright, so back under here, we can see the ends of our axle shafts have protruded in here past the spider gears, if that'll focus. And you can see the groove that C-clip's supposed to go in. The one on the right is plenty accessible, the one on the left isn't in all the way. And I can demonstrate by just pushing this axle shaft in just the remainder of the way, just a hair. Now we have access to that groove. We can slide our C-clip in there. So just like taking it out, I'm just going to place it on a magnet, and then put it into place. There's two ways you can do this. The easiest that I have found is to kind of hold it in there, place it in there with a magnet, get it to stay, and then reach with your other hand and pull the axle shaft back out. Now that C-clip is locked in there. So do the same thing with the other side. Take C-clip. This groove wears towards the inside of the differential. Basically because the axle shaft, the outside. That groove is from it pressing up against the spider gear. So you want to kind of orient it the same way it came out. So stick it on the magnet. Goes like this. That groove's going towards the outside. Line everything back up. Line this in that groove just like the other one. And it kind of balances magnet on the stick so it don't go nowhere. Reach out, grab the axle shaft, and she's in. Remove my magnet, and the axle shafts are in. So now we can rotate this differential. I gotta hop out and put the truck in neutral, rotate it so I can slide the crosspin back in. Alright, so we got the diff rotated and orientated to where we can put our crosspin back in. But if you look in there and notice something's out of alignment. Usually when you're trying to get the axle shaft back in, the minor twisting motion will turn the spider gears and shift everything around a little bit. But it's really easy to get back in alignment. Just take you a small flathead and just start just a little bit. Just all it takes is a little movement. Now we should be able to slide this pin back in. Of course, you want to keep your alignment hole there on this end that we're putting. You got to put the locking bolt back in there. But aside from that, just line it up and slide it right back in. Give it a little wiggle, kind of like when you're getting it out. There it goes. Again, don't tap this with a hammer. A rubber mallet maybe, but it's not ideal. It should slide in with very little effort. And you can get it in there to where it's just about flush. If you can't quite get it in there, it might help to just reach over here, jiggle an axle shaft a little bit. That'll reposition those spider gears. Alright, so once I was able to put 2 hands on it, I was able to reach out, grab one of the axle shafts, just kind of rock it back and forth a little bit while putting pressure on this pin with the other hand, and it dropped right down in there. So, ran my bolt in, I fixed it, put the truck in park, it's still in neutral, so I can tighten this bolt, the locking bolt down. I'm going to give this thing one more spray with some brake cleaner and get all this nasty old fluid and stuff out, and get this edge cleaned out. Actually, I might clean that off first before I spray it, because crap's going to drop down in there probably. So I can get ready to put the new diff cover on. Alright, so we got our diff all cleaned up. Mating surface for the gasket for the cover is clean as a whistle. Sprayed it down again with some brake cleaner. Get everything else out. Everything looks really good, so I'm going to give this some time to completely dry out and work on the brakes. Get the now the axles are in, I can get the rotors back on and get the calipers back on. And once that's done, I can mop up whatever's left in the bottom with a rag. Put some sealant on the gasket, throw the cover on, and we'll be good to put fluid in it. And, well, actually, after I put that on there, obviously you got to wait for the sealant to cure a little bit, but she'll be done. Well, we've got the brackets on both sides, pads loaded in them. Lo and behold, first caliper I try to go and compress the piston back into, it's seized up. Got it that far, but it's not quite far enough to clear the new pads and rotor. So, luckily I had these bad boys that I salvaged from junkyard a while back. They're probably most likely reman. I could probably run the number and find out for sure. But got a set of calipers and I'm gonna put on it. That's the left one. Got the right one over here. I even pulled the hoses off the same vehicle because they look like they were actually replaced. I'm not gonna bother with these right now, but I will just keep them in my stash. You never know. But I have new O-rings. There they are. For the lines, the banjo bolts. I'm going to get these cleaned up. If I really felt like bothering, I'd go ahead and paint them red like the old ones, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to throw them, clean them up and throw them on. Pull these brackets off. Save these brackets, obviously, because like I said, these are prone to having these rust up and break off in there, which I shouldn't have that problem again anytime soon with the new slider pins, fresh grease in them, and new boots to keep the moisture out. But I'm just going to throw these calipers on there. I have to get my wife out here to help me bleed them when it's all said and done. And so she'll just get replacement calipers while it's at it. So, fun. Alright, so we got our new calipers on. Again, these are junkyard calipers that I found that were in, they look like they had recently been put on and replaced. So, came off the same vehicle with these rotors actually. So we got our new ceramic pads, replacement calipers, new guide pin hardware, new rotors, new brake shoes, backing plates on them. Got the other side as well, all buttoned up and done. Got my wife out here to help me bleed them. And now it's time to clean up a little bit of this mess and throw the diff cover back on. Originally, factory was just a gasket. I've seen people use just a gasket. I've seen people use just sealant. I'm partial to using both. You do what makes you happy. Personally, I've always been a fan of gasket with a thin layer of RTD on either side. So that's what I'm going to do. So I can get this rear end button back up. Let it sit for a while. Probably come back out here later today, put fluid in it, be done. As I'm waiting for that to set up, I will go ahead and just throw the wheels and tires back on so I can set it back down on the ground. But that's really all that's left. Alright, so we got a new diff cover on. Bolts are torqued down. And like I said, I did use the gasket, paper gasket, and some black RTV. So I'm going to let it cure for a while before I put diff fluid in it. I've got the plug out right now, the fill plug. So I'm going to let her sit and cure. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and throw the wheels and tires back on. And so that's done when it's ready to put fluid in. Well, as far as I'm concerned, this pretty much wraps up the video. The diff cover's back on, the wheels are back on. I haven't torqued them down because it's still in the air. The only thing I got left to do is put fluid back in it. and torque the wheels down, and she's done. So that pretty much wraps up that little job. Again, to recap, we pulled the diff cover off, drained the fluid out, pulled the brakes apart, pulled the C-clips out after removing that crosspin bolt and then the crosspin itself from the spider gears in the diff, slid the axles out, replaced the backing plates, replaced the wheel seals, threw everything back together on the brakes, threw a new diff cover on there with the new RTV and a gasket. So it's definitely an involved process, but in the end, the rear end is pretty much new now except for bearings and the gears. And the brakes should last me quite a while without giving me any more issues. So yeah, it was a long video, but appreciate you sticking through it and watching, and hope you learned something with it. So just go out there and do it yourself. Don't pay somebody to do this crap.